Chapter 770. Upon hearing this, the girl seemed to have just noticed that her hand was pressing on the young man's hand. She quickly retracted her hand and looked at Fengjiu, asking, "Sell me this robe. This is what I saw this morning." "I'm sorry, I want to give it away. I'm not selling it." She smiled and kept the robe. At the same time, the two men behind her who had been silent all this while silently sized up Fengjiu. Seeing that he was wearing the School of Stars and Clouds uniform and the rainbow-glazed feather at his waist, their gazes couldn't help but waver. Just as the girl was about to speak, one of them stopped her. "Little sister, since this young master is buying it, let's find another one. There's no need to make a fuss over a robe." Hearing this, Fengjiu glanced at the man and smiled. He was about to walk out when he was stopped by the man. "Young master, please wait." The man walked forward and clasped his hands in greeting, asking, "May I ask if you are Fengjiu from the alchemy department?" "I don't think I know you." Fengjiu glanced at him and said, "Ah, you don't know me, but I've heard of you. As a new student, you're not only a popular figure among the new students, but you're even more popular than the top 10 students. I've always wanted to make friends with you, but I never had the chance. Why don't I be the host and treat you to a drink at the restaurant in front?" At this point he seemed to remember something and said, "I forgot to introduce myself. My surname is He and I'm a disciple of the He clan, one of the 8 great clans in Star Cloud City. No, I have something to do. I can't stay for long." He waved his hand and took a step forward. The girl angrily blocked his way. "How can you be so ungrateful? My brother wants to treat you because he thinks highly of you." She glared at him angrily, but when she met the young man's deep, bottomless eyes, she couldn't bring herself to say the rest of her words. "Miss, please make way." Fengjiu's voice was gentle and indifferent. A smile appeared on his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. Seeing this, the man immediately pulled the woman aside. "Little sister, don't be rude," he growled. Just as he was about to speak, Fengjiu had already walked out. Not long after, he disappeared into the crowd. "Brother, why are you being so courteous? That person really doesn't know how to appreciate favors. Furthermore, he even bought my heavenly silkworm robe." She stomped her foot angrily. The man on the other side was also a disciple of the 8 great clans. At this moment he walked up and said to the woman, "This person is not simple. Even if you can't befriend him, you can't provoke him." "I don't see anything special about him." The woman pursed her lips and said, 2 months ago the principal of the School of Stars and Clouds and the other instructors went to rescue the person called Fengjiu. Our clan only found out that he came from a 9th-ranked country, and the other clues were cut off. In short, it's best not to provoke this person," the man said as he took the lead and walked out. "Did you hear that? Avoid him if you see him in the future." The man surnamed he also instructed before following the people in front of him out. The woman stomped her foot and harumphed. She turned around and glared at the shopkeeper who was standing at the side, before running off with the people in front of her. Chapter 771. When she arrived at the black market, the president and Elder Gong were already waiting there. Elderly was also with them. Seeing Elderly, Fengjiu couldn't help but want to laugh. Although she knew that her medicine was a treasure that cultivators would fight over, she didn't expect that Elderly, who had lived for so long, would actually be so clingy. She did have medicine, but she wouldn't give it out so casually. If he wanted her things, it was impossible. "Young Master Feng, the things you wanted have been prepared. They're all in here," the president said and handed over a spatial ring. Fengjiu raised her eyebrows. "This is a spatial magic tool." "Hee, an unremarkable little thing. Just take it as a gift for young Master Feng to play with." Compared to her helping them advance, this spatial ring was really not worth mentioning. Hearing this, Fengjiu nodded. "All right, then I'll accept it. Let's settle the bill." Thus, the president brought her to the back to settle the bill. Because it was something she wanted, those spiritual herbs could be said to be given to her at their original price. The price was much lower than outside. For this kind of small favor, he would give it to her in passing. "Young Master Feng, I had someone prepare a banquet. I want to invite young Master Feng to a meal." "No, it's getting late. I have to rush back before the sky turns dark." Next time, even if you don't treat me, I'll make you treat me." She smiled, put away the things and bid farewell. Seeing this, the president and Elder Gong didn't urge her to stay. They just nodded and sent her out of the black market. Elderly wanted to speak a few times, but because the president and Elder Gong were present, he was too embarrassed to speak. In the end, he could only watch her leave. After returning to the academy, Fengjiu buried herself in pill refining again. If she encountered something she didn't understand, she would ask the two alchemists. In addition to the results of her own research, her progress in pill refining could be said to be 1,000 miles a day. After another month, her pill refining room finally quieted down. After taking a bath, she walked out of the cave feeling refreshed. After a few months of research, he had almost grasped the Tao of alchemy. Recently, he had refined a lot of pills, but he had never tried them out, nor had he taken them out to sell. Now it was time to take a break. However, just as she was about to find Yi Jing and her brother for a chat, she bumped into the vice director. Fengjiu, I was just about to look for you. Is something the matter, Vice Academy head? She was slightly surprised as she sat on the flying feather. She was curious about his serious expression. Yes, come with me, he said as he walked towards the main peak. Fengjiu followed closely behind him. When she arrived at the main peak, she saw that the principal was also present. She bowed and said, "Greetings, principal." "Sit." Because there was no one else around, only the three of them, he directly said, "I called you here because I have something to tell you." She sat down at the table and said, "Dean, please speak. Since you're holding the Azure Edge Sword, you've naturally heard of Tianyuan Palace. It seems that Tianyuan Palace's palace master Chu Batian has some relationship with you, right?" Hearing this, her eyes moved slightly and she nodded. "Yes, he's my master." Although he hadn't taught her anything, he had left her many good things. In her space, some of the things were her master's lifelong collection, while others were originally in her space. Chapter 772. Fengjiu didn't say anything and just listened quietly. The headmaster would not mention this for no reason. They had all seen her possessing the Azure Edge Sword that day, but none of them chose to say anything about it, nor did they leak any information about it. Now that he mentioned it a few months later, something must have happened that she did not know about. The Tianyuan Palace is filled with vicious people who kill people like flies. There are also some rogue cultivators who are rejected by the righteous path. They have all become members of the Tianyuan Palace. However, after Chu Batian became a mystery, the Tianyuan Palace became a group of dragons without a leader. About a month ago, there were rumors that the people of the Heavenly Yuan Palace had gathered. They were divided into two factions to fight for the position of Palace Master, which led to some fights over territory. We only received the news half a month ago, but there were many people who received the news before us. He paused for a moment before continuing. Chu Batian is a reckless person. Back when he was in charge of the Heavenly Yuan Palace, he restrained his subordinates very well. Now that the Heavenly Yuan Palace is lacking a leader, since you are the owner of the Qingfeng sword, I want to ask you, what are your plans for this matter? Dean, do you want me to take care of this mess? She asked with a smile. It's not like that. The Tianyuan Palace is a great power. Every cultivator's battle prowess isn't inferior to our academy's teachers. It's a mess, but it's also a big piece of meat. I'm worried that after a long time, this piece of meat will be targeted by other powers and taken for themselves. When that time comes, it will inevitably lead to uncontrollable trouble. I promised my master that I would reorganize the Tianyuan Palace. However, I know very little about the Tianyuan Palace. I didn't expect that there would be two powers fighting in the dark. She smiled and said, I will definitely take over, but I need to ask the dean for someone. Someone who? The dean was startled. Even the vice dean was surprised. Protector Xianghua. Her eyes flickered as she uttered these four words. Protector Xianghua? The two of them were startled and said, We don't know this person. How can you ask us for him? Fengjiu smiled and said, It's all right as long as I know him. She smiled and stood up saying, I'll leave first, go back and prepare well. She took a step out but suddenly stopped and walked back. Dean, I haven't seen that fairy-like emotion lately. Hearing this, the two of them were startled. He went back because he had something to do. He'll be back in a while. Oh, so that's how it is. I have something here. I'll have to trouble you to pass it to him. Just say that it's my compensation. As she spoke, she took out the wrapped heavenly silkworm garment from her space and placed it on the table. All right. The dean nodded. He was puzzled. Could it be that the two of them already knew each other? The next morning, Fengjiu woke up naturally and tidied up. She left White and Tun Yun at Elixir Peak and left the academy. She planned to go to the place where the students of the academy had gone to train and get Xianghua out first. Almost no one knew about her departure. Even Yeting, who had been paying attention to her whereabouts, only knew that she was no longer in the academy a few days after she left. Chapter 773. Brother, let's talk nicely. How can you do such a disgraceful thing? Brother, at most I won't ask your young lady for a reward, but you can't do this. Bah. Reward? Go to hell and ask the king of hell for it. We're already being generous by leaving your corpse intact. If it were young master today, your blood would have splattered everywhere. Brother, I don't want any reward, okay? Just let me go. Just treat it as doing a good deed. Let you go? Don't worry, I'll let you go. Fengjiu, who was not far away, leaped lightly and landed on a tree to watch. She saw that the two burly men were digging a hole in the forest. One of them even jumped in to test the depth of the hole. Finally, he came out and placed a young man in green beside him into the hole. Then he began to fill the hole with soil. Buried alive? She raised her eyebrows. She felt that the disheveled young man looked somewhat familiar. Brother, let's talk about it. Don't shovel the soil first. Brother, can you not put soil on my head? Seeing this scene, Fengjiu could not help but smile. She remembered who this young man was. It was the man called Bai Shao, Lao Bai's former master. However, she did not expect to meet him again after so long. She casually plucked 2 leaves and shot them with spiritual power from her fingers. They hit the 2 burly men on their wrist. They cried out in pain and clutched their wrists as they looked around and shouted. Who is it? Come out. You're burying my friend. Fengjiu crossed her arms and leaned on a tree branch. She looked at Bai Shao, who was half buried in the soil, and smiled at him. Long time no see, Bai Shao. You've made yourself look so pathetic. Kid. How dare you use a hidden weapon to hurt people? One of them saw that it was a young man and immediately scolded him. I think you don't want to live anymore. Fengjiu plucked 2 more leaves and said, Are you sure you don't want to leave? This time my 2 leaves won't be aimed at your wrists. When the other person saw this, he looked down and saw that it was really a leaf that had hurt them. He was shocked and quickly pulled the person next to him away, but Fengjiu stopped him. Wait a minute. Didn't you say you wanted us to leave? We were just following orders. We didn't want to bury your friend. The 2 of them were shocked. Their legs were trembling and their faces were pale. To be able to use a leaf as a hidden weapon, how high was his cultivation? In any case, the 2 of them couldn't use the leaves as hidden weapons. They weren't a match for this young man. Pull him up before we go. She gestured with her chin. Oh yes. The 2 of them hurriedly responded and used their uninjured hands to pull up Bai Shao, who was half buried in the sand, before running away as if they were being chased by some poisonous snake or ferocious beast. Fengjiu. Bai Shao hesitated before calling out Fengjiu's name. Yes, it seems like you still remember me. She nodded and smiled. Bai Shao, what happened to you? How did you get yourself into such a sorry state? As she spoke, she untied the ropes on his body. It's a long story. Chapter 774. Old Bai. It's a long story. She smiled and shook her head. She looked at the dirt on his body and said, There's a stream not far ahead. Do you want to take a bath? Change your clothes? That's a good idea. We can talk after I've washed up. It's really rude of me to be like this. He was a little embarrassed. He followed the direction Fengjiu had pointed out and found the stream. He quickly took off his clothes and jumped into the stream to take a bath. Fengjiu did not follow him. Instead, he caught a pheasant and roasted it while he was bathing. It smells so good. Fengjiu, I've been hungry for an entire day. They haven't given me any food. He changed his clothes and his hair was still dripping with water. He sat down beside Fengjiu and drooled as he stared at the pheasant roasting over the fire. Come, have some wine first. She took out a small jar of wine from her space and poured him half a bowl. It's enough. He held the bowl with both hands. I don't really know how to drink. If you don't know how to drink, then you can't drink on an empty stomach. How about this? Wait a moment, this pheasant is almost done. She smiled and began to add some seasonings. She asked, Why are you always wandering around whenever I see you? Where are you going? I don't want to go anywhere. I was just chased out by my family. They told me to come out and gain experience. but I kept running into obstacles. He held the wine in both hands and stared at the pheasant as he spoke. He told her everything that had happened to him in the past few days. "You're from a family of beast masters?" She was slightly surprised but immediately understood. That's right. If he wasn't from that family, he wouldn't have been able to get a strange horse like Old Bai. "Yes, but it's useless. I'm not good at martial arts, so I only know how to tame beasts. But sometimes accidents happen when it comes to taming beast. For example, I can't tame a strange horse like Old White. For example, the pet beast of the young lady just now, for some reason, it jumped around and scratched its master's new clothes. It even scratched the back of its master's hand until it bled. Fengjiu cut a chicken leg with a knife and gave it to him. In other words, you have nowhere to go now? Well, my family won't let me go back. They want me to make a name for myself outside. However, making a name for myself is too difficult. I'm afraid that I'll lose my little life." He swallowed his saliva and took the drumstick. Because it was slightly hot and he used a leaf as a cushion to keep it warm, he took a bite. The rich aroma of the meat spread in his mouth, making his eyes turn red. "Fengju, you treat me too well. You don't know that family asked me to tame beasts, but they gave me vegetables and steamed buns to eat every day. I was so hungry that I lost a lot of weight. Yesterday they didn't give me any food and today they caught me and buried me alive. They really went too far. Do you really know how to tame beasts?" He was also very doubtful. After all, when they first met, he was thrown off the back of a horse by Lao Bai. "Of course I can, it's just that there are some accidents occasionally, but I really know how to tame beasts, really." As if afraid that he wouldn't believe him, he emphasized again. "Since you have nowhere to go, do you want to come with me?" She was like a big wolf with a big tail, smiling innocently. "The place I'm going to this time has many beasts. You can use it to practice. How about it? Do you want to come?" Hearing this, he didn't immediately agree. Instead, he looked at her with a serious face and asked, "If you see me being chased by a beast and have nowhere to run, will you save me?" Chapter 775. Just like that, what was originally a one-person journey became a two-person journey. Feng Jiu led him to sit on Flying Feather as they headed towards the training forest. On the way, she told him about Senior White. One day later in the morning, the two of them arrived at the boundary of the forest. Looking at the forest, she couldn't help but think about how she had escaped here. After escaping from the Hall of Hell, she didn't know how long she had walked and how many mountains she had crossed before she reached this place. Thinking about how she had been caught by the uncle in the end, she couldn't help but shake her head. Everything was fated. As long as it was fated, no matter how they avoided or escaped, they would still bump into each other and they would still walk together. "Fengjiu, there's a boundary here. We can't go in. Why don't we go somewhere else? This place looks really creepy." Bai Xiao looked at the stone tablet at the side that was engraved with the words, "Important training ground, boundary protection, vicious villains, ferocious beasts everywhere." Seeing those words, he couldn't help but want to retreat. What if he couldn't get out of such a dangerous place? "We came here. Moreover, this place isn't a place where you can enter and leave as you wish." She smiled and waved the two white jade tokens in her hand. "Other than ferocious beasts, there are also some villains caught by the three major sects in the School of Stars and Clouds. However, they can't get out without this thing. They can only be trapped inside and become a dangerous training ground for the three major sects in the School of Stars and Clouds." "You said that the person you're looking for is also inside. You said that the people trapped here were all villains. Hee, there are exceptions to everything. Alright, let's not talk about it anymore. Let's go in." She put a hand on his shoulder and pushed him in without giving him a chance to hesitate. Their bodies seemed to pass through a layer of air. The air was slightly distorted and they were squeezed in. She was also a little curious about this boundary. After all, she had entered without a jade token the last time. "Fengjiu, this place is eerie and the presence gives me a very dangerous feeling." The man who had no power to protect himself nervously grabbed Fengjiu's red coat. He couldn't be blamed for being timid. Even though he came from a family of familiars, his familiars would always have people protecting them. Even in the extremely dangerous dire beast forest, he wasn't afraid, because he knew that if there was any danger, the people around him would definitely protect him from any harm. However, it was different here. Although Fengjiu was familiar with him, they had only met twice. Who knew if he would run away if he was in danger? Fengjiu didn't know what he thought of her. If he knew, he would have kicked him twice. Seeing Zhao Hai's pale face, Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle. He patted Zhao Hai's shoulder and said, "You need to train your courage. Since we're looking for people, I'll help you train your courage." "There's no need, right? I'm just a beast tamer, not a warrior. There's really no need." He waved his hand. However, how could he resist Fengjiu's persistence? Chapter 776. In the evening, Bai Xiao dragged an injured wild boar to a tree and shouted, "Fengjiu, look, the single-horned rhinoceros caught this for me. It's so big it's enough for us to eat for several days after roasting." "You handle it. I'll rest for a while," Fengjiu said lazily from the tree. They had been walking around in the forest for nearly a day, but other than encountering ferocious beasts, they hadn't seen any villains. This forest was so big that even if she sat on Flying Feather and walked around for 2 or 3 days, she probably wouldn't be able to finish exploring it. How was she going to find Xiang Hua in this forest? It was really a little troublesome. "Hey, then you rest for a while. I'll call you when it's done roasting," he said without looking up as he handled the wild boar. However, when he was about to start a fire, he realized that there weren't enough branches, so he planned to go around and pick some up. "I'll go and pick up some branches to use as firewood. I'll be back in a while," he said to Fengjiu as he walked forward. Fengjiu didn't mind. The two of them had been through this area before, so it wasn't dangerous. However, when she glanced at his back and closed her eyes again, she heard a cry of surprise after a few breaths. She immediately opened her eyes and rushed toward the sound. When she arrived at where Bai Xiao was, she saw several burly men holding large swords to her neck. Her eyes couldn't help but flicker. "What are you doing?" She leaned against the tree and asked lightly. She didn't walk forward and just looked at the men with her arms crossed. "Kid, are you too new here?" a burly man asked in a rough voice. Her eyes flickered and she nodded. "Yes, we just came in today. Which group are you from? How did you get in?" The burly man was still asking, as if he was guessing the credibility of Fengjiu's words. "Which group are you from? Which group are you from when you come in?" She looked at the burly men with slight surprise. Judging by the strong smell of blood on them, they must have killed many people. "Of course, tell me your name and how did you get in? Speak." Hearing this, Fengjiu's lips curled up slightly. He played with a strand of his hair as he said, "Listen well. I am the handsome and extraordinarily handsome man known as the flower thief Jade-Faced Fox, who is known as the invincible flower thief in the world." Hearing the long name, the few ferocious-looking men were stunned. They looked at Fengjiu with a strange expression and curled their lips, saying, "To put it bluntly, he's just a lowly flower thief? But what about this guy?" He patted Bai Zhao's face and asked. That's about right. But I have a name, Jade-Faced Fox. That brat is my little brother," she said with a smile. "I don't care if you are a flower thief or a jade-faced fox. Once you enter this place you will either die or surrender. Which one do you choose?" The burly man patted Bai Zhao's shoulder with the large knife in his hand, making a ping 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 sound. He was so shocked that his face turned pale. "This doesn't mean I'll surrender to you guys, right?" She rubbed her chin and looked at them as she asked. "Hey, you don't know because you're new here. There are rules here. If you follow the boss, you'll have meat to eat. Even if you're trapped here, you'll definitely be able to get out one day and kill them all." "Oh, I see. Then of course we'll surrender. Who wouldn't want to suck up to someone powerful? Isn't that right?" she said with a smile, her gaze landing on the large knife resting on Bai Zhao's shoulder. Chapter 777. Hearing this, the burly man moved his saber away and said to the two of them, "Let's go." As he spoke, they surrounded Fengjiu and Bai Xiao in the middle to prevent them from escaping. "Wait," Fengjiu shouted. "Are you going back on your word?" The burly man glared at him fiercely. "Of course not. I was just thinking that since it's our first visit, we should at least bring some gifts for Big Brother, right?" She smiled and pointed to a place not far away. "There's a wild boar we hunted earlier over there. Let's carry it together." "I didn't expect you to be so tactful." One of them sneered and strode over. Not long after, he carried the wild boar that Bai Xiao had hunted over. The few of them followed him all the way into the depths. On the way, Bai Xiao tugged at Fengjiu's sleeve and winked at him, asking what to do next. Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled disapprovingly. He lowered his voice and whispered in his ear, "Play it by ear. Don't be afraid." "What are the two of you chattering about?" Someone shouted from behind. My little brother is timid. I was just telling him not to be afraid. Now that we're here, there's someone protecting us. Fengjiu turned around and smiled. His dazzling smile made the burly man mutter under his breath. He was indeed a flower picker. His face was even more beautiful than a woman's. Under their lead, the few of them went deeper into the depths of the forest and walked on the path that was covered with arrays. Her eyes flickered. There were a lot of talents here. The arrays here were ingenious. One after another, it was somewhat beyond her expectations. Who set up this array? So ingenious. Hey, I didn't expect you to have such good eyesight. You can see the ingenuity of this array at once. A burly man behind them grinned. This array was set up by Big Brother. It's because of this array that we can move around more freely. Moreover, those ferocious beasts can't do anything to us. Oh? Then boss is the strongest person here? She asked. The average strength here is around Great Soul Master. There are also peak Great Soul Masters. Boss seems to be a peak Great Soul Master. However, I heard boss say that Xianghua is also here. His strength is not only at Great Soul Master, but it is said that he is savage by nature. Boss is thinking of ways to rope him in. Shut up. Why are you talking so much to him? The big man in front turned around and shouted. He glared at the big man behind him. We're all on the same side, so what's the harm in talking about it? Fengjiu smiled disapprovingly and followed them. An hour later, when they passed through the last formation, they finally saw burly men standing or sitting on both sides. When those people saw the two new faces, their gazes also started to size up the two of them. Most of their gazes stopped on the handsome young man in red clothes. Seeing the young man's face that was even more beautiful than a woman's, a few of the big men's gazes flickered. They didn't hide the interest in their eyes at all as they stared at Fengjiu. Deshan, where did these two brats come from? Where did you get them? A big man raised his chin and asked. Chapter 778. Let these two kids meet the boss? They look like weak chickens. Dashan, why do you bring random people to our place? The burly man who spoke stood up and looked at Fengjiu and Bai Xiao. His interested gaze swept past Bai Xiao and landed on Fengjiu, who was dressed in a dazzling red robe. Kid, you're a rapist. With your physique, are you raping other people? Or are you being raped? Ah. When the surrounding people heard this, they all burst into laughter. Their eyes fell on Fengjiu and lingered on him meaningfully. You're too much of a bully. Bai Xiao shouted angrily. She clenched her fists and glared at them, but she shrank back timidly beside Fengjiu. So what if we're bullying you? Don't you know that newcomers are always bullied? The burly man cast a sidelong glance at the two of them and suddenly reached out to lift Fengjiu's chin. Don't tell me you've been raping too many girls. Look, even your face is prettier than a girl's. Ouch. Before he could finish his teasing words, he sucked in a breath of cold air and screamed. The surrounding people were also shocked and stood up one after another. They saw Fengjiu playing with the dagger in her hand and slowly wiping away the blood on it. At her feet, she stepped on a bloody finger. Speak if you want to, but don't point at me with your dirty finger. Look, I accidentally lost my finger, she said casually and raised her eyebrows at the burly man. Kid, you're courting death. The burly man shouted angrily. Enduring the pain of his broken finger, he clenched his other hand and punched Fengjiu. His speed was fierce and his strength was not weak. Fengjiu pushed Bai Xiao back and lifted her leg to kick him. A red figure flashed and a cold light flashed. The burly man fell to the ground instantly. Blood seeped out of his neck and his body twitched on the ground. He stared at Fengjiu. He wanted to say something but he couldn't. In the end he couldn't breathe and his body stiffened on the ground. He died. Seeing that the young man killed a great spiritual master in one move, the few people who originally wanted to step forward hesitated. They stared at him with vigilant eyes and sized him up. The surrounding people who were laughing also quieted down. Everyone's gazes fell on him. Some were surprised but some understood. As for the burly men who brought Fengjiu and Bai Xiao here, they were stunned. After a while they came back to their senses. They could not help but retreat and widen the distance between them. Don't be afraid. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. She wiped her dagger and smiled innocently. Actually, I don't like this kind of fighting and killing. It's just that sometimes no one listens to me when I talk, so I can only use violence. Don't take offense. The surroundings were quiet. No one responded to her. They only stared at the red-clothed young man as if he was a monster. They were all extremely evil people and had killed many people. At this moment, they deeply understood that a person who took people's lives while talking and laughing was far more terrifying than anyone else present. Just as everyone was silent and the atmosphere in the air became heavy and oppressive, the wooden door in the treehouse opened with a creak. Chapter 779. Fengjiu thought that the person who could be called boss by these brawny men would at least be a tall and sturdy man, or a cultivator with a stout physique, or a bloodthirsty murderer with a fiendish expression. However, the person who walked out greatly exceeded her expectations. It was a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. He wore a student uniform that she didn't know which Academy of Stars and Clouds he got from. His temperament looked so gentle and harmless, and his smiling eyes gave people the same feeling. However, in Fengjiu's eyes, this person was like a smiling tiger. The cultivation of a peak great soul master seemed harmless, but it was fatal. No wonder he could become the boss of these people at such a young age. Obviously, without some methods he wouldn't be able to shake these vicious and evil people. How should I address you? The man stood on the treehouse and looked down at Fengjiu, who was wearing a red dress that was as dazzling as the sun. Without waiting for Fengjiu to speak, the brawny man who led the way hurriedly said, "Boss, this brat said he's some flower thief, jade-faced fox." "Yes, that's right. I'm the flower thief known as Jade-faced Fox." Fengjiu smiled and nodded her head as she spoke. The man's eyes carried a smile. "You don't have any evil aura on you, so how could you be a flower thief? Speak. Why are you looking for us?" Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. "That's where you're wrong. Clearly you guys were the ones who asked me to come here. How did it become me looking for you?" As she spoke, she glanced at the few people who led the way. "Boss, we caught them after we met them. If you find them pleasing to the eye, we'll just chase them out." The brawny men said, somewhat worried that the boss on the treehouse would get angry. After all, his methods were still frightening. It's easier to invite a god than to send him away. Since he's here, do you think he'll leave so easily? The man glanced at the few people. Although he had a smile on his face, his expression revealed a bloodthirsty aura. Hearing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle. "Don't worry, I don't want to find trouble with you. I just want to help you guys find someone here." Her voice slightly paused and she glanced back. Her gaze fell on the wild boar. "Look, I even brought you a gift of thanks." The surrounding people's mouths twitched. A wild boar as a gift? This person really wasn't polite. Hearing this, the man on the treehouse smiled and asked, "I wonder who you're looking for?" "Xianghua." She looked at the man said. "Heavenly Yuan Palace's left enforcer Xianghua?" The man's eyes flickered. "How did you know he was here?" "Of course I've met him. Can I ask why you're looking for him?" "He's a helper. Are you interested?" She looked at the young man mockingly. He was a little curious. How could such a young man be caught and trapped in here? The man smiled and said, "Let Xianghua be your assistant? You're quite arrogant." He smiled and walked down from the treehouse, saying, "We've been looking for Xianghua for some time, and we know where he stays in this forest. However, it's not that easy to catch him. If you're interested, you can come with us tomorrow to meet him." "Of course." She nodded and said to the two brawny men beside her, "Roast that wild boar." Chapter 780. Before the burly man could finish his sentence, he saw a sharp dagger slit across his neck. He caught a glimpse of a cold glint from the corner of his eyes, causing his entire body to stiffen. He stared at the red-clothed youth in shock. "I know that this is all about power. If you don't mind, can we have a spar?" Her indifferent voice sounded so languid, without any lethality or danger. However, the people around her frowned as they pondered, their eyes filled with an unprecedented seriousness. They were all villains who had taken hundreds of lives on their backs. Some of them had even taken more than 100 lives. To them, death was not something to be afraid of. However, none of them were willing to fall into the hands of a youth whose background they did not even know. The burly man obviously understood this point. After he froze for a moment, he carried the wild boar to roast it expressionlessly. "Why are you all staring at me?" She raised her eyebrows and swept her gaze across the crowd. After her gaze swept past them, they either looked away or retracted their gazes. The man's gaze swept past the accessory on the young man's waist that was half covered by the young man's red robes. After that he said, "Are you a student of the School of Stars and Clouds? To be able to obtain one of the 3 treasures of the Heavenly Nebula Tower, the rainbow-glazed feather, you are obviously not an ordinary person. You can recognize the treasure on my waist at one glance. Your eyes are not bad." Fengjiu laughed lightly. She sat down on a wooden stool beside a 4-legged wooden table made of wood. She took out some wine and 2 wine cups from her space. "Drink." The man sat down beside the table while Bai Xiao stood behind Fengjiu. The burly men around them saw that the young man took out something so casually. He was not afraid of being stared at by them. They were all deep in thought. "You don't look old. How did you get in?" She poured a cup of wine and handed it over. "I was caught by a few old things from Guiyi sect." He raised the cup and smelled the wine. "I've been here for more than 2 years. This is the first time I've smelled wine like this." Fengjiu smiled. After taking a sip she said, "Maybe you can consider it. If you follow me you will have a good life." "You have a way to get me out of here?" His eyes flashed as he stared at the young man in front of him. "Of course. So you're saying that you have a jade token that allows you to leave the academy?" "That's right," she replied with a smile. Then she felt the men who were originally sitting down stand up one by one and stare at her like hungry tigers. She was not unfamiliar with that kind of ferocious gaze. The man sipped his wine and narrowed his eyes. "You're very confident. I wonder if you really have the ability to be confident?" Fengjiu toyed with the wine glass and smiled. His eyes flashed with a touch of wickedness. "Maybe you can try, but I won't let you try in vain. If you lose, my life will be yours." As soon as he finished speaking, the wine glass in the man's hand flew out. At the same time he flipped his hand and a dagger was held in a reverse grip towards Fengjiu. Fengjiu tossed the wine glass in his hand. He raised his hand and spiritual energy flowed out. Invisible spiritual energy flowed out like water ripples and swept the wine glass into the air. He reached out and grabbed the man's wrist that was holding the dagger and twisted it to the back. He easily parried the man's attack with his other hand. He raised his leg and kicked the man's calf. The man's knee hurt and fell forward. Chapter 781. Fengjiu flicked her other hand with spiritual power and caught the 2 wine cups without looking up. She gently placed them on the table. She stared at the man and said with a smile, "Your life is really worthless." The man stiffened slightly. His chin was slightly raised because of the dagger pressed against his throat. He looked up at the red-clothed youth who was smiling dazzlingly in front of him. Although his expression didn't show it, his heart was slightly shaken. He knew very well what kind of skills he had, but this youth's skills were actually above his. He subdued him with a raise of his hand, and the dagger pressed against his throat was his own. The burly men who stood up around them stared at the 2 of them with different expressions. Some of them originally wanted to attack, but when they saw the youth subduing their boss in a few moves, they all held back. They were all great spiritual masters. Seeing how the youth killed one of them in the blink of an eye and then subdued their boss, they already knew that his skills were definitely above that of a great spiritual master. However, above great spiritual masters were foundation establishment cultivators. Could it be that this youth was already a foundation establishment cultivator? Fengjiu withdrew her hand and sat down with a flick of her robe. Her slender white fingers tapped on the table. "Pour the wine." Bai Xiao, who was standing to the side, was startled. When he came back to his senses he picked up the wine jar and was about to pour wine for her, but she stopped him. "I'm not talking to you. Go sit on the side." She waved her hand and indicated for him to sit down. Her gaze fell on the man who was kneeling on one knee in front of her. Bai Xiao was startled. He obediently put down the jar and sat down on the side. He stared at Fengjiu and suddenly felt that the aura that Fengjiu sometimes emitted was very intimidating. It made people involuntarily obey and not dare to disobey. He had only seen that kind of pressure and that kind of aura from his clan's ancestor. The man stared at Fengjiu for a while before standing up. He put away his dagger and walked forward to pick up the jar of wine and pour a cup for the youth. Seeing this scene, the surrounding men all frowned, but they didn't say anything. They only stared at them. They watched as the red-clothed young man sat at the table while their boss stood at the side. When the young man finished drinking the wine in his cup, he poured another cup for him. Until a voice sounded, everyone's gaze shifted to the source of the voice. "It's here, the roasted wild boar is ready." Two burly men carried a whole roasted boar forward and placed it on a tree. After placing it on the table, the two men said to the man, "Boss, this wild boar is very tender. It was roasted by Big Mountain using a special method. The smell of the hind leg is more fragrant, but we know that you prefer light flavors." When the man heard this, he looked up and glanced at Fengjiu. Fengjiu was holding a glass of wine and drinking. His face was slightly red and there was a hint of blurriness in his eyes. It was as if he had drunk too much and didn't hear what the other two said. He finished his glass of wine and shouted for more wine. Bai Xiao tugged at Fengjiu's sleeve. "Don't drink too much. It won't be good if you get drunk." He looked at the burly men who were eyeing the two of them like wolves and tigers and felt a little worried. "Yes, I won't drink too much. The roasted meat is here. Come, let's cut 2 pieces and have a taste." Chapter 782. Let me cut it. Let me cut it. The two men who were carrying the roasted pig were waiting at the side. When they heard Fengjiu's words, one of them stepped forward, picked up a knife, and cut 2 pieces of hind leg meat from the pig's hind leg. He carried the meat with a leaf and placed it in front of Fengjiu and Bai Xiao. "The hind leg is roasted very well. Try it. It's crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. It's very fresh." The burly man gestured for them to try the meat first. Bai Xiao looked at the roasted meat in front of her and couldn't help but swallow her saliva. She looked at Fengjiu. Fengjiu didn't look at them. He just looked at the roasted meat in front of him and said with a smile, "In that case I'll try it first." As he spoke, he picked up the piece of hind leg meat wrapped in a leaf. When he was about to eat it, a pair of hands reached over and took the piece of meat away. Fengjiu's eyes flickered. When he looked up, there was only confusion in his eyes. "What are you doing? Can't you cut it yourself if you want to eat it?" The man took away the 2 pieces of hind leg meat from Fengjiu and Bai Xiao and moved them to the side. He picked up a knife and said, "The best part of this wild boar is the neck. The meat is very springy, fat and juicy. Since you want to eat it, you have to eat this piece." As he spoke, he ignored the stares of the burly men. Instead, he cut 2 pieces of hind leg meat and placed them in front of the 2 men. "Try it." Fengjiu took a bite and gestured to Bai Xiao. "Eat it. The taste is a little bland but the texture is good." Bai Xiao responded and picked up a piece to eat. As the sky darkened, Fengjiu directly became the man who spoke here. He told them to prepare to look for Xianghua tomorrow morning. Then he took Bai Xiao and occupied the treehouse as a place for them to rest. The treehouse was not big. Fengjiu slept on the bed and Bai Xiao could only find a random place to lie down and sleep. As for the people below, when they saw the 2 of them enter the treehouse, they retreated to the array formation outside. All of their gazes landed on the man. Some of them even questioned, "Boss, why didn't you kill those 2? That's right. If we let them eat the flesh of the hind leg, no matter how strong that red-clothed youth is, he will only become a soul under our hands. Boss, why did you stop them? Why didn't you let us kill those 2? Boss, don't tell us you're really going to be that young man's subordinate." When they said this, they all quieted down. Pairs of eyes stared at him. Their eyes were filled with viciousness, as if they were saying that if he really dared to do this, then he shouldn't blame them for not being polite. How could the man not know what these people were thinking? These people were all extremely vicious people. Every one of them had killed too many innocent people before they were captured by the 3 sects in the School of Stars and Clouds. They called him Big Boss, but that was only because they knew that he could protect them in this place. If their interests were truly endangered, it was not impossible for them to turn against each other and become enemies. Therefore he said, "Do you all think it's easy to kill that red-clothed youth? Just based on the fact that he dared to bring only 1 person here, you should know that his strength and cultivation are definitely above ours. If we suddenly make a move, we will all be annihilated by him. Is that what you want to see? But we can drug him." "Drug him? How do you know that he doesn't know about drugs? What if he knows?" the man asked in a low voice. His sharp eyes swept over the person who spoke. Chapter 783. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. He didn't do anything to us, so let's ignore him for now. Let's find Xianghua tomorrow, the man said and told everyone not to provoke him. Then he signaled for them to go back and rest. No one noticed that a red figure flashed through the night sky like a ghost, silent and undetectable. The next morning Fengjiu lazily stretched and got out of bed. After washing up he kicked Bai Xiao who was sleeping beside the bed. Get up, get up. Bai Xiao turned over and suddenly remembered where she was. She quickly jumped up and saw that Fengjiu had already walked out. She quickly got up and followed him out with a sleepy face. Outside, when the two of them came out, everyone's eyes fell on them, especially the red figure. You're all up early. She yawned and stretched, asking, should we go now? Yes, there's still some distance from where Xianghua is. If we go now we should be able to meet him. The man looked at Fengjiu and said, I haven't introduced myself since yesterday. I'm Du Fan, known as the Iron Fan Scholar. Iron Fan Scholar? Fengjiu was slightly stunned and looked him up and down. I don't see how you look like a scholar. But where's your Iron Fan? Hearing his words, everyone was slightly surprised. This young man had never heard of their boss's name? The Iron Fan Scholar was quite famous in Enchanting, but he had never heard of him? Du Fan was also slightly stunned. Hearing his question he said, Iron Fan was destroyed. He paused and couldn't help but ask, you've never heard of the Iron Fan Scholar? I've only heard of Princess Iron Fan. Fengjiu said with a smile. His eyes swept over them and asked, but looking at you it seems that this name is very famous? Du Fan didn't know what to say. He just said, it's getting late. Let's go. With a wave of his hand he led the others out of the formation. Seeing this, Fengjiu looked at Bai Xiao beside him and asked, you often travel around. Have you heard of the Iron Fan Scholar? I've heard of him but I've never seen him before. It's said that this person's methods are savage. He once annihilated a village with the surname Qin in a single night, not even sparing the elderly and children. Because of this he was known by others. Because of his scholarly attire and the iron fan in his hand, he was called the Iron Fan Scholar. Vendetta? She raised her eyebrows. I don't know about that. Bai Xiao shook her head. Along the way the people in front did not speak much, but Fengjiu and Bai Xiao who were following behind chatted all the way. About 2 hours later the crowd in front finally stopped. I asked them to surround Xianghua. Do you want to go and take a look? Du Fan walked over and asked Fengjiu. Yes, let's go and take a look. She nodded and followed behind. At this time Xianghua, who was wearing animal skin, was filling water by a stream. Just as he was about to go back he vaguely heard a flurry of footsteps behind him. He turned around and saw that the people had quickly formed a circle to surround him. Xianghua, I finally caught you today. Chapter 784. I've long heard that you're here but I didn't expect it to be true, another brawny man said. Xianghua, we're really enemies on a narrow road. Back then I was beaten up by you and had to lie in bed for nearly a month before recovering. Now that you've fallen into my hands, how should I repay you? Just as the crowd was about to beat him up, they heard Fengjiu's voice from behind them. Repay what? Have you forgotten that this person is mine? Fengjiu, who was dressed in red, walked out from the back. She walked past the crowd and arrived in front of Xianghua. After looking him up and down she smiled and said, we meet again. Xianghua looked at the red-clothed youth who had saved his life. His eyes moved slightly. You're here for me? That's right. Do you want to go out with me? She crossed her arms and looked at the person in front of her with a smile. When the people behind her heard this, their expressions changed slightly. Go out. They also wanted to go out. Go out for what? Of course to go out and do something big. Hearing this, the people behind her had strange expressions. Why did she sound like a bandit? Did this young man really not run out from some mountain? Not interested. He walked past the crowd and was about to leave. Some people blocked his way while others looked at Fengjiu expectantly. He's not interested but we're interested. Hearing this, Fengjiu chuckled. But I'm not interested in you. When the brawny men heard this, their expressions turned ugly. The people of Tianyuan Palace have been causing trouble again recently. It's said that they're divided into 2 factions and they fight every 2 or 3 days. Many forces have set their sights on Tianyuan Palace, intending to swallow this fat piece of meat. She said casually and walked leisurely in front of him. I promised someone to reorganize Tianyuan Palace, so I had to take over. I came to you because you were once the left protector of Tianyuan Palace, so you're familiar with everything about Tianyuan Palace. You should be able to help me. You want to reorganize Tianyuan Palace? Xianghua sneered and glanced at the youth in front of him, thinking that he was a little ignorant. Yes, I do. She nodded and smiled. You don't believe me? Let's make a bet? Xianghua pursed his lips and stared at the youth, saying, right now I am only a great spirit master cultivator. This kind of strength can't help you much. Isn't it just a damaged golden core that caused a cultivator's strength to drop to the level of a great spirit master? Don't worry, I'll be able to restore your golden core cultivation within 3 days. Fengjiu said disapprovingly. It was not difficult for her to help people improve their cultivation. What's more, Xianghua had a strong foundation. The decline in his cultivation was only because his golden elixir was damaged. As long as his golden elixir was repaired, his cultivation would naturally return. She spoke casually, but she didn't know that the people around her were shocked. A golden core cultivator who could recover his strength within 3 days? Is this for real? Could a broken Jindan be repaired? Xianghua was originally a golden core cultivator, but after he was betrayed, his golden core was damaged and his cultivation regressed. His spiritual power would forever remain at the level of a great spirit master, but he didn't expect that today someone would actually say that a damaged golden core could be repaired. Chapter 785. Well, didn't your golden core break? It should have been damaged by a palm strike, right? Fortunately, your golden core didn't break completely, so it can still be repaired. Wasn't it? What did he mean by wasn't it? A broken golden core meant that a cultivator's life was ruined, but for him, it was just a simple word, wasn't it? Was this young man ignorant? Or was he really capable? Did he know what a broken golden core meant? I've never heard of a broken golden core being repaired. Why should I believe you? At this moment, Xianghua couldn't take a step forward. His whole body was tense, and his hands under his sleeves were tightly clenched into fists, suppressing the excitement in his heart. On the side, Du Fan also looked at the red-clothed young man in shock. He could tell that he wasn't joking, but seemed to really have the ability and a way to repair the damaged golden core. Pfft. Fengjiu sneered and glanced at him. I don't believe that you don't want to try in 2 days. As she spoke, she turned and walked in the direction of the treehouse. Bai Shao hurriedly followed, thinking repairing the golden core? It seems that I've never heard of it. However, can Fengjiu really do it? Looking at the young man who turned and walked away, Xianghua almost didn't hesitate to step forward and follow him. No matter whether it was possible or not, he wanted to try. After all, no one wanted to spend their whole life doing nothing. The group of burly men looked at each other as they walked back. They whispered to each other, a broken gold core can be repaired? Why haven't I heard of it? That's right. Are you serious? Regardless of whether it's true or not, I'm just curious whether this young man knows medicine. Nonsense, how can he say that he can repair the golden core if he doesn't know medicine? As soon as this person finished speaking, the surrounding people fell silent, as if they had thought of something, and they all froze. Yes. Since he knows medicine, doesn't that mean he knows that they put medicine on the roast pig last night? But why didn't he mention it? At that time he even picked it up and was about to eat it. Does he really not know, or is he pretending not to know? Du Fan's eyes flickered as he followed behind. He only needed to think a little to know that the young man from last night was trying to test him. At this moment he couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if he hadn't taken away the poisoned roast meat and let him eat it instead. After walking for about 2 hours, they returned to the treehouse. Fengjiu turned around and looked at everyone. Finally, his gaze fell on Du Fan. Du Fan, set up a barrier here and watch over your subordinates. Without my permission, no one is allowed to enter. Du Fan glanced at him and replied, yes. Then he called everyone out and set up a barrier around them to prevent anyone from intruding. Inside, Bai Shao asked, what about me? What do I have to do? Is there anything I can do to help? Go to the side, Fengjiu said. Then he said to Xianghua, sit down and give me your hand. Xianghua glanced at him, went to the table, sat down and stretched out his hand. He watched as the young man stretched out his hand to feel his pulse, then took out a pen and paper to write on the side. In the end, he took out a lot of medicinal herbs from his space and began to mix medicine on the table. Seeing the young man's skillful movements, Xianghua's eyes moved slightly. He wanted to ask several times, but he held back. Chapter 786. Xianghua looked at the bottle of dark green liquid. His eyes moved slightly, but he still didn't say anything. He picked it up and drank it in one gulp. Go to the small bed in the treehouse and lie down, she ordered without raising her head. She picked up some herbs and took out a small medicine stove from the space and handed it to Bai Xiao. Boil this for me. Boil 2 bowls of water into half a bowl. Bai Xiao responded and hurriedly went to boil the medicine. Xianghua went up to the treehouse. It didn't take long for him to feel a little dizzy. He held the bed and lay down. It didn't take long for him to lose consciousness. At the table under the tree, Fengjiu began to prepare the restoration medicine. Fortunately, the medicinal materials in her space were very sufficient. She had almost all the medicinal materials needed for restoration. However, the medicine to restore the golden elixir was not so easy to refine. This was her first time experimenting. As time passed, Xianghua was still asleep in the treehouse. Fengjiu was still preparing the medicine, and Bai Xiao had poured out the medicine. The medicine is ready. Should I give it to him? Bring it over. I'll add something. She gestured for him to bring the boiled medicine over. Bai Xiao walked forward with the medicine in her hands. She took out some kind of medicinal powder and mixed it into the bowl. The originally pitch-black bowl of medicine seemed to have a little bit of green light floating around it. It was very strange. He fainted. Give it to him bit by bit. Don't waste it. She handed the bowl to him and instructed. I know. Bai Xiao carried the medicine up and really poured it down his throat with a spoon. It took half an hour for him to finish the bowl of medicine. After he came down, he couldn't help but ask, Fengjiu, why don't you let him drink it himself when he's awake? When I gave him the medicine before, his whole body was in a state of dormancy. The medicine he drinks now will go straight to his dantian and directly repair the golden elixir. Only in this way can the effect of the medicine not be lost. Can have a very good effect. Hearing this, he nodded his head in confusion and didn't ask any more questions. Help me deal with the medicine here. That's it. Crush it for later use. All right. Bai Xiao came to the side to help. Both of them were busy with their own tasks. As time passed, the people outside the barrier were getting impatient. Boss, are we just going to let them do as they please? A muscular man asked. Boss, will you follow them? Boss, why don't we charge in and kill all 3 of them? Du Fan glanced at them coldly and said, all of you stand guard at a proper distance from each other. Don't drag me down. His bloodthirsty gaze swept across the crowd. If anyone dares to have any thoughts, don't blame me for ending his life first. Hearing this, although everyone was dissatisfied, they did not dare to talk about that topic again. Some of them sat in groups of 3 or 5, some said that they were going out to hunt some game, and some sat under a tree to rest. All of them were waiting. They wanted to know if the red-robed youth could really repair the damaged golden cores. Du Fan stared at them. After seeing that they had all sat down in an orderly manner, he then sat under a tree with half-closed eyes. His mind was spinning rapidly. Time passed and night fell. The faint roars of ferocious beasts could be heard from the forest. In this pitch-black night, it gave people a kind of penetrating and dangerous aura. Chapter 787. In order to repair the gold core, in addition to the assistance of medicine, she also needed to use golden needles to pierce the acupoints and supplement it with spiritual power to have a miraculous effect. This golden needles piercing the acupoints was her own unique acupuncture technique. Even in this immortal cultivation world, there was no one who could use this kind of acupuncture technique. In other words, she could repair the damaged gold core, but other people might not be able to do it. Bai Xiao stood aside and watched with bated breath, not daring to disturb him. She noticed that each golden needle was condensed with spiritual power visible to the naked eye. With the rotation of the golden needle, the spiritual power seeped into the body. Finally, she watched as Fengjiu moved his hand away, but the golden needle was still there, trembling slightly. She watched as Fengjiu took out another golden needle and inserted it into a different acupoint with the same technique. Again, each golden needle had a spiritual power visible to the naked eye. The unconscious Xianghua's upper body was naked, and his body was covered in beads of sweat. His face was red from time to time, and as more and more golden needles fell, his body began to condense spirit energy. This spirit energy seemed to be stimulated by the golden needles, and it seemed to be resonating with each of the golden needles. Wipe my sweat. Fengjiu raised his head slightly, twirling a golden needle in his hand. Bai Xiao heard him and hurriedly went forward to wipe the sweat from his forehead. While her task here was to wipe his sweat. It wasn't until midnight that Fengjiu pulled out all the golden needles from Xianghua's body and fed him medicine again. Only then did she let out a sigh of relief and walked to the side to find a place to rest. Fengjiu, water. Bai Xiao handed him water and asked, "How is he? Is he okay?" "Tonight is the repair period. It will probably be repaired tomorrow morning." She took a sip of water and said, "Stay here and guard me tonight. You can also find a place to rest." "So the damaged gold core can really be repaired?" He was a little surprised because he didn't believe it from the beginning. Even though he saw the way he inserted the needles, he still had some doubts. Upon hearing this, Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. "What? Do you really think I'm lying to you?" She chuckled. "Otherwise, why do you think Old White can speak? Didn't you say that Lao Bai ate one of your pills by mistake?" As soon as he finished speaking, he was slightly stunned. "That's right. If he really didn't have the ability, how could he refine medicinal pills? Moreover, it was the kind of pill that could make beasts speak. That's why I said you'll have meat to eat if you follow me, right?" She patted his shoulder and smiled. "Xiao Bai. Spy Shao." He was a little displeased. "Little White suits you better." She chuckled and said, "Little White, let me tell you, there are too many benefits to following me. Look, after I conquer the Tianyuan Palace, I'll make you a protector. How about that? From now on, you will be a beast tamer of the Tianyuan Palace. You need to practice your skills quickly. Even if you can't defeat your opponent, you can still use your familiars to fight. Do you understand?" "But I'm just a beast tamer, not a beast tamer." Chapter 788. It doesn't matter if you can't beat them. Tame Beastie and let it fight for you. You'll definitely be able to beat them to a pulp. At that time you'll be so powerful. When you return to your family in the future, won't everyone fawn over you when they see you? Don't you think so?" Upon hearing Fengjiu's words, Bai Xiao was completely intoxicated by the future she had planned for him. Listening to it, she felt that it was really the case. She could not help but feel excited. "So, even if my combat strength is not good, as long as I become a beast tamer, I can let Beastie fight for me?" His eyes were shining and there was unconcealable excitement in his words. "Of course." Fengjiu nodded affirmatively. "So, beast tamers have a very bright future. Fengjiu, don't worry. I'll definitely work hard and won't let you down," he said confidently. The little bit of lack of confidence and timidity in his heart had long been replaced by excitement and exhilaration. "Well, I have faith in you. Good luck." She patted him on the shoulder and said, "I'll take a rest first." As she spoke, she took out a cloak and covered herself with it. Then she sat back and closed her eyes to rest. The night seemed to pass by peacefully. That night, Du Fan completed the task given by Fengjiu very well. He guarded the formation and did not let anyone step inside. Last night, two big men wanted to enter while he was resting, but they were both killed by him. Perhaps the bloody scene shocked everyone and made them stop thinking about it. At dawn, Fengjiu, who was in the treehouse, examined Xianghua's body. He covered his dantian with his palm and probed his damaged golden elixir. When his divine sense detected that the golden elixir had been completely repaired, and Xianghua's aura had also been raised from a great spiritual master to the level of a golden elixir practitioner, he withdrew his hand with satisfaction. "Fengjiu, his aura has now returned to the level of a golden elixir practitioner?" Bai Xiao squatted next to him and asked. "Yes, I've recovered. With the help of the medicine, I've directly become a peak Jindan stage cultivator." A confident smile appeared between her brows. She knew that there was nothing that Fengjiu couldn't do. Upon hearing this, Bai Xiao's eyes flashed and she asked, "Fengjiu, can you treat my father as well?" She raised a brow. "Your father also injured his core formation? Didn't I tell you before? I'm from the beast taming clan. In fact, our clan calls us beast taming, but the only one who truly knows how to tame beasts is our clan's ancestor. He truly knows how to tame beast. Us juniors, including my father's generation, can only be considered beast tamers, not beast tamers. Originally, my father had the highest chance of becoming a beast tamer. However, one year, a ferocious beast injured his golden core. After that, nothing happened. So, I was thinking that if you can really repair his golden core, why don't you help my father repair it too? He looked at him with a hopeful expression. Upon hearing this, she narrowed her eyes and smiled slyly. About that. Actually, it's not impossible, but hee. But what? Tell me first, are you one of my people? She stared at him like a fox and asked. What do you mean by one of your people? Don't tell me you really have that kind of hobby. He looked at her with a horrified expression and couldn't help but take a step back. Chapter 789. What do you mean? He asked with a frown as he touched his aching head. Hearing this, Feng Jiu sighed. I'm really curious. How did you survive until now after leaving the family for so long? She had no choice but to make things clear when she met such an ignorant person. It means that you have to be loyal to me and can't betray me. Deal. Hearing this, he thought for a moment. Well, actually, it's possible. It means that I recognize you as my master, right? I submit to you and then you protect me and my family? You seem to be quite strong, so you should have the ability to protect my family. So of course I'll do it. Fengjiu glared at him. She wanted to take back what she had just said. This guy was just pretending to be stupid. With one sentence he directly asked her to protect his family. You should hurry up and train your familiar. Otherwise I'll lose too much. As the two were talking, they heard Xianghua move on the bed. They looked at him and saw his hand move. Not long after, he opened his eyes. You're awake. Fengjiu stood by the bed and looked at Xianghua, who turned over and sat up. He couldn't hide the excitement on his face. How do you feel? The spiritual force in my body is abundant and vigorous. That's the aura of the peak of the golden elixir realm. He looked shocked and looked at Fengjiu. You really repaired my golden elixir and promoted my cultivation to the peak of the golden elixir realm? What do you mean you? From now on you have to call me master, Bai Shao said from the side. Just call me ninth young master, Fengjiu said with a smile and squinted her eyes. Hearing this, Xianghua immediately knelt on one knee and saluted. Greetings, ninth young master. Thank you for your great kindness. Repairing the golden elixir was a great kindness. In this life, there was no harm in acknowledging her as his master. Get up. She gestured, moved her hand slightly and took out the Qingfeng sword. She asked, Xianghua, do you recognize this? Xianghua looked at the 7-star gorgeous sword. After the sword was opened, a green light burst out. The words faintly appeared on the sharp sword blade made his eyes narrow. Qingfeng sword. That's right, it's the Qingfeng sword. Do you know why I'm looking for you? Apart from your familiarity with the Heavenly Yuan Palace, more importantly, you're the first guardian of the Heavenly Yuan Palace. You're also the person who followed my master to Batian. Young master's master is the palace lord? He widened his eyes in shock. He didn't expect the young man in front of him to have a master-disciple relationship with the palace master. Immediately he asked, what about the palace master? No. The Heavenly Yuan Palace declined decades ago and he passed away decades ago. I only became his disciple because I was fated to meet him. I followed the will he left behind to find the Qingfeng sword and rebuild the Heavenly Yuan Palace. At this moment she did not have her usual playful and lazy expression. Instead she was cold and serious. Therefore I need your help. I want the Heavenly Yuan Palace, which has been in decline for decades, to regain its prestige. Hearing this, he was so excited that his eyes reddened. Back then I followed the palace lord and was promoted to left guardian by him. At that time I was only in my early 20s and was only a great spiritual master. Who would have thought that after so many years I would be able to see the Qingfeng sword again and hear about rebuilding the Heavenly Yuan Palace? Chapter 790. Seeing this, Bai Shao hurriedly said, Me too. Let's go. I came here to look for you. Now that I've found you, it's time to go out. She said with a smile, stepped out of the treehouse and jumped down directly from the top. She led the two people behind her out of the formation and went outside. When the people outside heard the footsteps, they all turned to look at the three people. When their eyes fell on Xianghua, they were shocked and looked at Fengjiu in disbelief. This young man really repaired the broken gold core? The pressure on Xianghua's body was no longer the same as what they had seen yesterday. In just one day he had really raised his cultivation back to its original level. Du Fan's eyes swept over Xianghua and fell on Fengjiu, and his eyes lit up. He really didn't misjudge him. The people in front of them couldn't help but make way for them. They all retreated to the sides and watched the three of them walk all the way forward. At this time Du Fan saluted the crowd and said, "Brothers, we'll meet again someday." As he spoke, he quickly followed the three people in front of him. "Boss, are you really going to go with them?" A man blocked him and asked angrily. "Of course I can go out. Why would I choose to stay here with an unfathomable master?" Du Fan revealed a smile. Looking at the murderous glints in their eyes and the bloodthirsty ferocity that permeated the air, he immediately said, "As brothers, I advise you not to make a move. If you make a move, the ones who will die in the end will definitely be you. Risking your lives won't change anything, so why gamble your lives?" Hearing this, they all gritted their teeth, but they didn't move. They could only watch him leave quickly, catch up with the three people in front of him, and disappear from their sight. Damn it. He really left just like that. We've always called him boss, but at this time he abandoned us and left. He really doesn't have the code of brotherhood. A burly man glared at Du Fan's departing figure and cursed loudly. "Well, what's there to be angry about? Don't tell me you wouldn't leave if it were you? It's the same no matter who it is. What real brother or fake boss? They're just making do with each other. If it weren't for the fact that they want to live a better life here, who would acknowledge a brat as their boss?" Hearing this, the originally angry crowd gradually calmed down. This was originally the case. There was indeed nothing to be angry about. They were all cruel and bloodthirsty people. How could they treat a person with sincerity? In the end, they were just using each other. On the other side, Fengjiu and the others walked out. Around noon, when they were about to leave the boundary, Fengjiu stopped and looked at the three of them. "I'm only going to say this once. Remember it well." Her voice was leisurely and indifferent, but there seemed to be a hint of warning in it. "I hate betrayal the most. If I find out one of you betrayed me one day, then it won't be a matter that can be resolved with just one death." When she heard this, Bai Shao immediately said, "Don't worry, young master, I'll absolutely not betray you." "Me too," Xianghua said in a low voice. Du Fan looked at Fengjiu and said, "My life belongs to master. Without master there would be no me. In this life I'll betray anyone but master." Chapter 791. As soon as the oath of heaven and earth appeared, the light shot into his glabella. Seeing this, Fengjiu nodded and said to the three of them, "Let me tell you about my identity. My name is Fengjiu, the princess of the Phoenix dynasty, a 9th-ranked country. In addition to this identity, I also have another identity, the Ghost Doctor. Currently I'm studying alchemy in the Star Cloud realm. Since you've followed me, you should know something about me. As for other things, I'll tell you on the way." "Wait, princess." Bai Shao looked at Fengjiu with his eyes wide open. "So you're a woman? What's wrong with being a woman?" She raised her eyebrows and glanced at him. Being glanced at by her, Bai Shao was startled and quickly said, No, I was just thinking that you're a woman. No wonder old Bai stuck to you and refused to leave as soon as he saw you. Let's go." She took out 3 jade tokens and gave them to the three of them. After leading them out of the bounded domain, they first went to the nearest town. Because Xianghua and Du Fan didn't have anything in the forest, and even the clothes they were wearing were taken from others, she gave each of them a qiankuan bag as soon as they entered the city, and asked them to buy some things that they often used. "Let's meet at the restaurant in front of us in the evening." She pointed to the restaurant in front of them and said a few words. Then she left first, intending to find the local forces of Yandian to inquire about the current situation of Tianyuan Palace. After walking around the city, her eyes fell on a loft. Looking at the 3 words "Cool Breeze Restaurant," she remembered the time when Huilang was thrown here. She couldn't help but smile. She paused for a moment and then walked in. "Young master, it's still early. Our restaurant hasn't started business yet," the man lying lazily on the couch said without even opening his eyes. Fengjiu glanced at the man. He was wearing a purple robe with a jade pendant hanging from his waist. His face was covered with a book, and there were 2 identical twin guards standing beside him. "Renxiang." Hearing this, the person lying down moved and the book covering her face slid down. Fengjiu glanced over, and the little pornographic pictures on the book made her mouth twitch. Reading pornographic books in broad daylight, It was no wonder that he was the owner of a brothel. Rin Xiang opened his eyes and glanced at the person who had come. With this glance he immediately jumped up and surrounded Fengjie with shining eyes. He clicked his tongue and said, "Isn't this the ghost doctor who has bewitched my master? Why are you here? You even know that I'm running the Cool Breeze gang here?" Fengjie chuckled when he heard this nonsensical remark. "I heard from Hui Lang that you're in charge of this brothel. I just happened to pass by, so I came in to take a look." As she spoke, her eyes fell on his face, which was more outstanding than Hui Lang and Ying Yi's. "It's really better to see you in person than to hear about you." "Same here." He smiled meaningfully and made a gesture of invitation. "It's rare for you to come here. No matter what, I have to treat you to a cup of wine. Come, there's a courtyard behind." "Okay." She nodded and followed him to the back. When they arrived at a courtyard behind, the two sat down at a table in the courtyard. The twin guards served them tea and then retreated to the side. Rin Xiang looked at Fengjie, who was dressed in men's red clothes, and said with a smile, "What can I do for you to come here?" Chapter 792. "That's right, I'm here to find out about the Tianyuan Palace." She directly stated her intentions. Tianyuan Palace? This faction has been causing a lot of trouble in Qingting recently. However, they are divided into two factions and have been fighting amongst themselves. Many factions have already set their eyes on them. "Why, are you interested in this faction too?" He gently scraped the tea and glanced at her as he spoke. You can say that." Hearing this, Rin Xiang took a sip of tea and put down the teacup, saying, "This faction is a little messy now, and the people in one of the factions are ruthless, causing many aristocratic families and factions to be unhappy. I just received news yesterday that one of the villains has set their eyes on the 100 Years Mountain. However, the 100 Years Mountain is owned by a small family, and that family has been there for generations. However, it seems that they intend to exterminate the family. The people of the Tianyuan Palace are much more ruthless than our Yen Hall." Hearing this, Fengjie's face darkened, asking, "What about the other faction? Are they just going to let them do whatever they want?" "There are fewer people in that faction. It is said that they used to follow the left guardian Xianghua. There were originally 50 to 60 people, but the leader of the villains is a nascent soul cultivator. He has been looking for opportunities to kill people in that faction, and now there are less than 20 people left. I think that even if they want to fight back, they don't have the strength." As he spoke, his voice paused. Seeing her slightly darkened face, he asked, "Are you really interested in this faction? Do you need our help?" "Just give me all the information you have and I can handle the rest," she said in a low voice. He smiled. "All right, but if you need help, don't forget about me. Master said that if you need any help, I will fully cooperate with you. Yen Hall will also be at your disposal." Hearing this, her eyes moved slightly. She thought for a moment and asked, "Do you have news of him?" Rin Xiang held his chin with one hand and asked with a smile, knowing the answer, "Who?" Fengjie glanced at him. "Of course it's your master." "Master." He sighed and shook his head. "It's not too good." Hearing this, her heart jumped. Why is it not too good? Is it the 1,000-year frost poison in his body? Or is it because of other reasons? Both. Other than his body, his current situation isn't very good either. Seeing the unconcealable worry in her eyes, he said, "That's right, I received news that you were attacked some time ago. Then I passed the news to Master. I think he will be even more worried after hearing about you." Upon hearing this, Fengjie glared at him. "Fino, why are you still spreading it? Nothing happened to me. If you tell him about this, it will only make him worry. What's the point of telling him? Those people originally wanted to capture you to deal with Master. Since I was left behind by Master to keep an eye on you, naturally I have to report any movements to my superiors, right?" He smiled and said, "I heard that you made a 10-year agreement with Master? Do you really plan to not see each other for 10 years? Hearing this, Fengjie chuckled. Her clear eyes swept him up and down with a smile. "Are you sure you're not a woman? Why are you more gossipy than a woman?" Chapter 793. Fengjie couldn't help but shake his head and smile. "I don't care about anything that can be robbed. So you don't have to worry about us." He smiled and asked, "It's getting late. How about I show you around the Cool Breeze gang? I remember this is a brothel, right?" She stared at him with a strange expression. "Yes. There are all kinds of handsome men here. If you want a seductive man, you can have a seductive one. If you want a strong man, you can have a strong man. Or a pretty boy. There are all kinds. See, there are also twins like this." He gestured to the two twin guards standing behind him. Hearing this, the two guards glanced at Fengjio at the same time. Then they lowered their heads and consciously took a step back. "In the future, when I have the chance, I will tell your master about you showing me around the Cool Breeze gang. I believe he will be very interested in this news." Being rebutted, Ren Xiang smiled embarrassedly. "Actually, I was joking." "Yes, I know. I was also joking." She smiled back. The corners of Ren Xiang's mouth twitched. At this moment he finally knew why his master had been completely controlled by her. At this moment he finally knew why Grey Wolf was sent to the Cool Breeze gang by his master when they met. In the end, Ren Xiang could only give her the information about the Tianyuan Palace. Finally, he personally saw her out of the Cool Breeze gang. Before leaving, he asked, "Child Feng, do you want me to send some people for you to use?" "No, I have people by my side." She waved her hand. "Thank you for the information. Well, if you encounter any trouble in the future, you can send someone to find me," he worriedly reminded her. She turned around and smiled. Then she walked away. Seeing that it was still early, she didn't go to the inn. Instead, she went to the treasure house to see if there were any suitable weapons for the three of them. She went inside and chose a sword for Xianghua, a dagger for Bai Shao, and a bag of silver needles. In the end, she didn't see any fan-like weapons, so she went to the shopkeeper. "Shopkeeper, do you have any fan-shaped magic artifacts here?" "A fan?" The shopkeeper thought for a moment and said, "Yes, please wait for a moment. I'll go and show it to you." The shopkeeper went up to the second floor. Not long after, he took out a medium-sized box. "Sir, please take a look. This is a white jade fan, but there is a mechanism here. Moreover, this is a flying celestial device. In addition to being an offensive celestial device, it also has defensive power. Therefore it is more expensive. This thing has been in our building for many years. What do you think, sir?" Fengjiu looked at it and nodded. "Not bad, I'll take it." Hearing this, the shopkeeper was overjoyed. He hurriedly put the fan back into the box and wrapped it up for Fengjiu. After calculating the bill, he even gave the bag of silver needles to her as a bonus. When she arrived at the inn, the three of them were already waiting there. Seeing her return, the three of them stood up. "Master, young master." Fengjiu's gaze swept over the three of them. She saw that Xianghua had changed into a black robe. His beard was shaved and he looked energetic. Du Fan had changed into a beige robe and was dressed like a scholar. His appearance was ordinary and unremarkable, but he was also upright. Chapter 794. When the three of them took a look at the things she handed over, they couldn't help but feel moved, especially Du Fan, who was even more delighted when he saw that it was a fan. "Thank you, master. Thank you, young master. I have one too." Bai Shao looked at the dagger and asked, "But it's useless for me, I rarely use it." He wouldn't dare to kill anyone with it. "It's for you to protect yourself, what do you think you're doing?" Fengjiu rolled her eyes at him and motioned, "Sit down." Then she beckoned the waiter to serve the dishes, and they ordered a table full of dishes and wine. After eating, have a good rest tonight. Tomorrow morning, Xiao Bai will go to the 100 Years Mountain with me. Xianghua, you and Du Fan will contact your former subordinates. After gathering them, secretly hide in the 100 Years Mountain and wait for orders," she said, pouring a cup of wine and drinking. "Yes." Several people responded, eating while thinking about things. After the meal, Fengjiu went to the guest room to rest, while Xianghua and Du Fan went out of the inn, intending to contact their people in the area. The next morning, after Fengjiu said a few words to them, she set off with Bai Shao to the 100 Years Mountain. Compared to looking for the people of Tianyuan Palace, she planned to go to the 100 Years Mountain to wait for them. It was more convenient and convenient. After flying for nearly a day, the two arrived at the foot of the 100 Years Mountain in the evening. Looking at the mountain, Fengjiu understood why the people of Tianyuan Palace were eyeing this place. It had to be said that this place was really good. It was surrounded by mountains on all sides and there was only one exit. At the bottom of the mountain, there was some depression forming a place like a valley. There were mountains and rivers around, and the environment was quiet and secluded. It was simply the best gathering place for forces, and the air was filled with smoke looking like a fairyland. How do we get in? This place should be private, right? We'll probably be caught if we go in. Bai Xiao looked around and saw that they could only see the outside but not the inside. She couldn't help but ask, "Do you think there will be an ambush inside?" Hearing this, Fengjie was speechless. If you were so careful in the past, you probably wouldn't have been buried alive. But look at this place, why is it strange? Normally, the location of the family should be in a bustling area, right? At least that's the case in my family, but here. Look, this place looks fine during the day, but at night I think it will be a little creepy. Upon hearing this, Fengjie's eyes flickered. She took a closer look and said, "Well, what you said makes sense. I was so focused on getting the information about the Tianyuan Palace that I forgot to ask about this clan. I only heard that it's a small clan that's not very influential. However, it's really strange that this clan chose to live here. Right? Thought it was strange. This is the only place on this mountain and there's only one clan. It's really strange." Bai Xiao said. Seeing that the sky was darkening, he couldn't help but ask, "Young master, how do we go in? Or are we going to find a place to stay first?" "Of course we're going in. Why are we here if not going in?" She looked at the sky and said, "It's getting dark. We can go in and say that we're lodging." Chapter 795. Seeing that she had stopped, Bai Xiao looked around and asked, "What's the matter? Why aren't you moving?" "There's an array." She glanced around and her gaze fell on the road under her feet. "There's an array starting from here. Moreover, this array is not an ordinary maze array." She raised her eyes and looked ahead. A thoughtful look appeared in her eyes. "Is this family really just a small one?" Bai Xiao, who was following beside her, saw that she was thinking about something, so he didn't disturb her. Instead, he looked around. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he seemed to see someone floating by not far away. However, when he looked again, the person disappeared. "Could it be that I'm seeing things?" He muttered and rubbed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Fengjie asked. "I think I saw someone just now," he said. "Someone? That's impossible. There's no one else's aura around here except for the two of us," she said. Then she added, "There's a fog in here. I think you're seeing things. Follow me closely and don't get lost in the array. This maze array can change." "Okay, I got it," he responded and followed closely beside her. Fengjie was familiar with arrays, so he walked in the array with Bai Xiao without any trouble. However, when the two of them walked out of the maze array and were about to walk forward, a voice suddenly sounded in their ears. "The two of you, this is not a place where you should be." Fengjie was stunned. He immediately turned around and saw a figure looming in the fog on their left. The person was dressed in a black robe. His entire body was wrapped in the black robe. His eyes were like a pool of lifeless stagnant water. They were gloomy and made people's heads tremble. Are you a human or a ghost?" Bai Xiao was shocked and asked in a trembling voice. The person's gaze fell on Bai Xiao and then on Fengjie. "Go back. You shouldn't be here." The voice was light and deep as it drifted through the air. It sounded as if it was coming from all directions. If they hadn't seen the figure standing there, they wouldn't have been able to identify the source of the voice. Seeing this, Fengjie came back to his senses. His eyes flickered as he cupped his fists and said, "Senior, we have no ill intentions. We just want to give your residents a reminder and a piece of news." The man looked at Fengjie quietly. "Speak. Senior, have you heard of the Tianyuan Palace?" she asked. "Yes." The black-robed man responded and didn't say anything else. Seeing this, Fengjie simply told him about the Tianyuan Palace's intention to occupy the 100 Years Mountain. Finally, she said, "Because there is a nascent soul cultivator, several golden core cultivators and many foundation establishment cultivators among them, I wanted to come over and warn you. If the strength of the mansion does not allow it, please avoid them as soon as possible." "Thank you. You may leave." The black-robed man didn't leave. He just stood there and stared at the two of them. "Goodbye." Fengjie didn't stay for long. He cupped his fists and left with Bai Xiao. The black-robed man watched the two of them walk into the formation. Not long after, their figures disappeared in front of him. Only then did he turn and leave. Chapter 796. We're leaving just like that? Bai Xiao looked back. That strange person had disappeared, and that dangerous aura had also disappeared. Yes, this place is not right. We can't go in again. As she spoke, she led him out of the array and to the foot of the mountain. She said, "We'll wait for Xiang Hua and the others at the foot of the mountain. We can't go in." Isn't that person very powerful? When he appeared, all the hair on my body stood up. It's not that the hair on your body stood up when he appeared. It's just that the cold air inside is heavier. Moreover, as the sky darkens, the cold air becomes heavier. So I think there should be something dirty inside. What? Something dirty? The kind that's light as a feather? His voice trembled as he asked. His face had also turned pale for a few days. He had been wandering outside for so long, but he had never encountered such a thing. How could he have encountered such a thing after only following her for a few days? Yes, I'll get someone to investigate this place later. How about this? You go into the city and wait for me. I'll wait here for Xiang Hua and the others. I'll go into the city to find you after they arrive. Alright, take this and go to the city to find a shop with the pattern on the token. Then ask them for information about the 100-year mountain. She gestured for him to leave first. Bai Xiao took the token and looked at her worriedly. He asked, "You want me to go first? Then what about you? This place is so dangerous. Can you do it alone?" "Don't worry. I'm not going in. Hurry up and go. Go into the city before it gets dark." She instructed him. "Right then. Anyway, I'm not good at fighting and can't help you much. I won't hold you back here. I'll go into the first inn in the city and wait for you. You can go there to find me." As he spoke, he put away the token and headed in the direction of the city. After watching him leave, Fengjiu looked back at the strange mountain. She also left and went to a tree by the mountain path to find a place to wait for Xiang Hua and the others. That night, Xiang Hua and the rest did not appear, nor did the group from the Heavenly Yuan Palace. However, she noticed that there seemed to be some sort of light drifting about the 100-year mountain. As the night deepened, a faint and strange sound rang out. The next day, everything was as usual. The 100 Years mountain looked like an ordinary mountain. She noticed that some woodcutters and herb gatherers would occasionally enter the mountain by mistake and walk out safely after circling inside. On the night of the second day, the surroundings were still quiet. There seemed to be a faint gloomy qi in the air. The night seemed to be very peaceful and nothing happened. However, on the third day, the people of the Tianyuan Palace came under the lead of the Yuanying realm cultivator. There were about 100 people, each of them emitting a ferocious aura. They strode towards the 100 Years mountain. Seeing nearly 100 people enter, her eyes flickered. After waiting for about half an incense stick's worth of time, she saw Xiang Hua and Du Fan arrive with about 20 people. Therefore she took a leap and arrived at the mountain path. "Young master." The two called out. After they came to her side, Xiang Hua introduced them to her. "They are all from the Tianyuan Palace. They are also the brothers I found. I have already told them that you are the disciple of the palace master. They are all willing to follow you." Chapter 797. Fengjiu's gaze swept over them. There were only 21 people. They all looked middle-aged, but in fact they were definitely more than 30 or 40 years old. Among them, 15 were in the Foundation Establishment realm, and the other 6 were in the Gold Core realm. Compared to the people she saw before, these people were not as ferocious as the previous people, although they had a murderous aura. However, there was still a strong smell of blood on their bodies. Obviously they had killed many people. She nodded. "Since everyone is here, let's go." With that she walked into the city. However, the people who heard her words were stunned. One of them asked, "Young master, they have entered the 100 Years mountain. Are we not going in?" "I'm not going in." She didn't stop walking and didn't even look back. The person behind her frowned and asked in a bad tone, "Then why are we here if we don't go in?" Originally, they wanted to follow her because they heard from Protector Xiang that she was capable and was the disciple of the palace master. Now it seemed that she was just SOSO. Fengjiu, who was in front, stopped and glanced back at that person. Are you questioning me? Seeing this, Xianghua hurriedly said, Young master, Ah Chang didn't mean that. It wasn't that he hadn't seen her kill people, and it wasn't that he hadn't seen her ruthless appearance. Therefore he knew that her dignity was not to be offended. I just want to ask, why don't we go in? Didn't we come here to stop them from killing people and forcibly occupying the land? The middle-aged man asked in a deep voice, ignoring Xianghua's signal. Presumptuous. Just obey the master's words. Why do you ask so many questions? Du Fan shouted and glared at the middle-aged man named Ah Chang. We heard from Protector Xiang that you are the disciple of the palace master, so we followed you. We thought that you must be extraordinary. However, we were slightly disappointed when we saw you. Could it be that you are afraid because they outnumber you? You don't dare to fight with them? So, why did you say that you want to reform the Tianyuan Palace? Why did you say that you want to restore the prestige of the Tianyuan Palace? Fengjiu ignored him and looked at Xianghua. Are these the people you brought? Hearing this, Xianghua lowered her head. I'm sorry, young master. No matter what kind of explanation he gave, it was futile. The further they were apart, the further they were apart. Immediately, he stepped forward and kicked the middle-aged man, forcing him to kneel on the ground. Apologize to young master. Protector Xiang, let me go. The middle-aged man struggled. He's just a brat. He's not worthy of my kneeling. When Xianghua called them over, he only told them that Fengjiu was Chu Beishan's disciple and the one who held the Qingfeng sword. The others didn't tell them much, so they also thought that Fengjiu was a man. Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled and said, Let him go. Seeing this, Xianghua glanced at her, then let go of his hand and let the man stand up. Unexpectedly, as soon as he stood up, he threw a punch at Fengjiu and shouted angrily, I want to see how much ability you inherited from the palace master. Tung, you stop. Xianghua was shocked. When he wanted to step forward, he was stopped by the others. Protector Xiang, just wait and see. You said that you brought us to follow this brat. No matter what, we have to see what kind of ability he has. Is such a person really worthy of holding the Qingfeng sword? To become our palace master? Chapter 798. Looking at the fist that was swinging towards her, she glanced at it coldly and a cold smile appeared on her lips. It has always been me who sees if others are qualified or not. No one has ever dared to see if I am qualified or not. You want to fight with me? You're far from qualified. As soon as she finished speaking, a silver needle shot out from her hand and shot into the middle-aged man's acupoint. With just one needle, he fell to the ground with a bang. The others were shocked. Just as they were about to step forward, they heard Fengjiu's voice. Didn't you want to go in? I'll let you in. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked at Du Fan. Throw him in. Yes. Du Fan responded. He picked up the man on the ground and rushed up the mountain. When the people behind him saw this, they all frowned and stared at Fengjiu with unfriendly expressions. After about the time it took to burn a stick of incense, Du Fan walked out. However, at this time his expression was somewhat strange. He came in front of Fengjiu and cupped his hands. Master, I've thrown him in. Then he stood behind her in an orderly manner. Fengjiu looked at them. You can go in too. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned and left. Du Fan followed behind her. Seeing this, Xianghua glanced at them and shook his head. He hurriedly left with Fengjiu. When the 20 people saw this, their faces darkened. It's just a brat. He's too arrogant. You want us to follow such a person? You don't know what you're talking about. Let's go. As they spoke, they all turned and walked up the mountain. They didn't intend to follow this youth with their lives. Now they felt that he wasn't worth following. As the sky gradually darkened, the faint sounds of insects could be heard from the underbrush. When the 20 people arrived at the top of the mountain and walked along the road, a gust of night wind blew, causing goosebumps to rise on their bodies. Why is it colder on the mountain than at the foot of the mountain? Yes, I feel it too. A gust of wind blew and it's a little strange. Wasn't a Chong thrown in? Why don't I see anyone? Wait, why don't I hear their voices in here? Even if hundreds of people came in, it shouldn't be so quiet, right? The group of people chatted as they walked inside. However, they found that after walking one round they were back to the same place. There's an array here? We actually managed to get out. Where's Shaolin? He knows formations. Let him lead the way. Someone shouted and turned around to take a look. A man in his 30s was pushed forward in the middle of the crowd. This formation is a little strange. I feel a little uneasy as I walk, as if the route will change. As he spoke, he was a little hesitant, but he was pushed by the others, so he could only brace himself and lead the way. However, after walking around, they came to a place where the fog was thicker. He said, "The fog ahead is thicker and the sky is dark. Follow closely, don't get separated." He didn't turn around, so he didn't know that the number of people behind him was decreasing one by one. However, there were still so many footsteps that why does it seem like there's no bottom in here? Even after walking for so long, we still haven't gotten out of this formation. It doesn't seem like an ordinary maze formation. Chapter 799. Ghost. There's a ghost. There's a ghost in this place. This piece of information echoed in his mind, causing him to break out in a cold sweat. Hearing the footsteps behind him and hearing the occasional response, he only felt his heart trembling. He had heard that there were ghosts in this world, spirits, ghost cultivators and the like, but he had never encountered one. At this moment he finally understood why Fengjio and the rest did not come in. It turned out that they already knew something was wrong with this place. No wonder the hundreds of people who came in did not make a sound. Could it be that they were all delayed by the ghosts? If that was the case, then they really did not have to come in. Their group was already gone, so why would they come in to die? The footsteps sounded a little messy, as if they were walking behind him. The chilly wind blew, accompanied by the faint rustling of leaves and plants. He did not know if it was an illusion, but there seemed to be a strange laughter coming from the darkness. He broke out in a cold sweat and did not dare to look back. Along the way he pretended that he did not know what was happening behind him. Step by step he walked out of the array saying, Let's go. I can't enter this place." "It's okay, I know the way, I'll bring you in." The eerie voice behind him scared him so much that he finally could not help but cry out in alarm. He broke into a run, but at this moment, a pair of cold hands reached out from nowhere and grabbed his feet, dragging him away. "It's okay. I know the way, I'll bring you in." The scream pierced through the night sky, echoing in the night. However, it seemed that this voice was blown away by the night wind, and only a faint sound drifted out. It was late at night, and the 100 Years Mountain was still quiet. Only in the depths of the mountain there seemed to be a house with faint flickering lights. Du Fan, who followed Fengjio into the city, was silent and did not speak. He only looked at Fengjio from time to time, wondering how she knew. The ghosts in this world were not tolerated by the secular world. Just like the ghost cultivators, they could only live in the dark. Even if they cultivated and could walk under the sun, they were still ghost cultivators in the end. Mentioning them would only make people retreat. Normally speaking, the majority of people who died would only become ghosts. If they did not enter the path of reincarnation, they would be reduced to ashes after floating in the world for a period of time. As for those who died with a strong sense of resentment and unwillingness, their souls would deepen after death, and they would become malicious ghosts and evil spirits. Those like ghost cultivators were even rarer because they needed opportunities. It was just like how ordinary people had to step onto the path of cultivation. Not everyone could do it. As for ghosts, not everyone could see them. Because of this, many people said that they were even scarier than cultivators because they didn't know when they would be haunted by evil ghosts. However, once one's cultivation reached a certain level, ordinary ghosts would not be able to get close to a cultivator. In fact, for some people whose aura was stronger and fiercer, those ghosts would not be able to get close to them. What he was curious about was, how did his master know that there was something strange about that place? How did he know that once they entered they would not be able to leave? Could it be that she had already explored the way? However, if she had really explored the way, how could she walk out unharmed? Chapter 800. Fengjio, who was walking leisurely into the city, smirked. His eyes were cold and his tone was indifferent. "That will depend on their abilities." Xianghua's heart sank. Depend on their abilities? Did this mean that the odds were against him? What was so strange about that place? Could it stop her from getting involved in it or even saying those words? They were silent all the way until they reached the inn. Bai Xiao, who had been waiting at the entrance of the inn for 3 days, saw them return. She immediately waved her hand and shouted, young master, I'm here, I'm here." He ran over to Fengjiu's side and looked him up and down. "Are you okay? You didn't come back for so many days. I thought you were delayed by ghosts." Fengjiu knocked his head as soon as he said those words without thinking. "You won't be delayed by me." She laughed and knocked his head. "Did you get the information?" He grinned and scratched his head. "It was delivered yesterday. Oh, let's talk inside." She nodded with a smile and walked into the room he had booked. Xiang Hua, who had followed them in, heard Bai Zhao's words and his eyes narrowed. He was one step behind and pulled Du Fan. "Du Fan, you've been in there. Is it true that?" "I didn't see it, but there was something wrong with it. There was also a formation. If I wasn't familiar with formations, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to walk out of it." Speaking of this, he paused for a moment. "After being together for so long, you should have some understanding of Master's character. Those people were seeking their own deaths, so they can't blame Master. You better not lose your sense of propriety. Don't forget how you got out of there." Hearing this, Xiang Hua's expression turned serious as he said, "Don't worry, I know my priorities." The two of them didn't mention it again. They went upstairs and entered the room. At the table in the room, Bai Xiao poured tea for Fengjiu and said, "I saw that you weren't back yet, so I read the information here. The 100 Years Mountain looks like an ordinary mountain to the outside world, but from the information here it's very strange. It's really like a ghost mountain." He sat down beside her and said, "It says that some ordinary people go in and walk around before coming out again. Anyway, they can't go in. However, some cultivators go in and never come out again. Also, it said that this place is more creepy at night, and there are faint ghostly flames floating. The information made a guess that this place might be a ghost village, or perhaps the people of this family are raising ghosts. In short, it is a dangerous place." Fengjiu looked at the information and listened to Bai Xiao making a fuss. He couldn't help but smile. "No matter how dangerous it is, you walked out of there. You didn't get dragged away at that time, so you don't have to worry. At that time, that person kept staring at you. I think that if you weren't there, I would definitely have been dragged away." He couldn't help but shudder when he thought of the black-robed man he met inside. After a long time, Fengjiu closed the information and handed it to Bai Xiao. The 100 or so people from the Tianyuan Palace went in and couldn't come out. "It's good. I don't have to do it myself." She stood up and patted her robe. She said to them, "Find a room to rest. We'll stay here for 2 days. If there are no changes, we'll leave." As she spoke, she gestured for them to leave. Chapter 801. Outside, Xiang Hua hesitated and looked at Bai Xiao. "Let me see the information." Du Fan and Bai Xiao both looked at him. After a pause, Bai Xiao handed the information to him. "Take a look. I have to return it to them later." Xiang Hua responded. After taking the information, he entered the other room that the waiter had booked. Bai Xiao said to Du Fan, "Shall we go downstairs to eat something?" Du Fan nodded and went downstairs with him. They ordered a few dishes and ate. Halfway through the meal, Bai Xiao suddenly said, "She hasn't eaten yet, has she?" So she ordered 2 more dishes and asked the waiter to send them upstairs. An hour later, the door of the guest room upstairs opened and Xiang Hua came out. Seeing the two of them downstairs, he went downstairs and returned the information to Bai Xiao. Then he went back to his room. "What's wrong with him? Why does he look so weird?" After drinking half a bowl of soup, Bai Xiao asked the waiter to clear the dishes on the table. She looked at Du Fan and asked, "Didn't you go to contact those people? Why are only the 2 of you coming back with the young master?" Du Fan looked at Xiang Hua's back and said, "Those people went into the mountain." Upon hearing this, Bai Xiao gasped. "Are you serious? They really went into the mountain? Isn't that a little too bold?" Du Fan stood up and went upstairs. "I'm going back to rest." Before Bai Xiao could say anything, he went upstairs first. Seeing that they were acting weird, Bai Xiao ignored them. She put away the information and planned to return it to them first. After all, they had told her that there was only 1 copy and she should return it after reading it. As the night deepened, the inn became quiet. However, at midnight, Xianghua opened the door and was about to go out when he saw a figure sitting on the railing in front of the door and looking at him. Are you trying to cause trouble for master? Du Fan stared at him and asked coldly. Xianghua was silent for a long time before he said, It is precisely because I don't want to cause trouble for young master that I plan to go alone at night. There's no need to go. You won't see a single living person even if you go back. Even if you go, you'll just be adding another dead person. That place is so strange that even master doesn't want to set foot in it. Why do you want to get involved in it? But I was the one who brought them here. They were originally going to follow that group of people. Even if you didn't lead them, they would still enter the mountain. You and master have already reminded them. They were the ones who stubbornly insisted on going to their deaths. They can't blame anyone else. Hearing this, Xianghua remained silent and stood still. Since you're already following master, you have to follow master's orders. Whether those people live or die, master didn't say, so you don't have to care. After saying this, he got up and returned to his room. Xianghua stood at the door for a long time. He looked in the direction of the 100 Years Mountain and sighed softly before he turned and went back into his room. The next morning, Fengjie was eating downstairs. At another table, Bai Xiao and Xianghua were drinking tea. After a while, Du Fan, who had gone out to inquire about the news, came in. Master, none of those who went into the mountain came out again. They're all inside. Yes. She responded. In her mind she was thinking, what's going on with that family? Even if it was written in the information, it was only some guesses and some superficial things. It didn't mention anything about what was inside. Chapter 802. Someone asked me to give this to you. A 7 or 8-year-old child ran in, but before he could get close to Fengjie, he was stopped by Du Fan. Let him come over. Fengjie gestured for him to step aside. Someone asked me to give this to you. The child came in front of Fengjie and handed him something, but his eyes were fixed on the snacks on the table and he swallowed his saliva. Seeing this, Fengjie took the thing and asked the waiter to pack some snacks while asking, Who gave this to you? It was a man in black. He said that he would give it to a big brother in red. Hearing this, Fengjie opened it to take a look. When he saw the content of the invite-like post, his eyes moved slightly. Young master, the snacks are ready. The waiter brought the snacks over. Fengjie took it and handed it to the child. For you? Thank you. The child thanked him happily, took the packed snacks and ran out quickly. She held the red invitation in one hand and tapped the table with the other. She looked outside with a thoughtful expression. She did not speak, and the 3 people beside her did not dare to ask. In the end, Bai Xiao could not help but ask, Young master, what is that? The family in the 100 Years Mountain sent an invitation. They said that they would hold a banquet for us in the evening, she said casually and tapped the red invitation lightly on the table. When the 3 people heard this, they were stunned. How did they know that we live here? Bai Xiao asked in a daze, then she whispered, They can't have been secretly following us, right? Sending an invitation for no reason? I don't think it's a good thing, Du Fan said. Well then tell me, why would they send this thing? Fengjie raised his eyebrows and looked at him. Du Fan paused for a moment, then said, It's very likely that they have their eyes on master. Hearing this, Fengjie smiled and said lazily, Even if they send an invitation, it doesn't mean that I have to go, right? But why would they have their eyes on me? I'm a little curious. Young master, it's better not to go there. That place is full of ghosts. If you go there, you might not be able to come out, Bai Xiao said in a low voice. Just thinking about that place made his hair stand on end. What are you nervous about? I didn't say I was going. Just throw this post away. She stood up and went back to her room. She really didn't want to go. That place looked like a ghost town. Who would want to go to such a ghost town for no reason? He was afraid that he would come back with some ghostly aura. Because she didn't plan to go, she threw this matter to the back of her mind. After returning to her room, she entered the space to cultivate, not taking this matter to heart. When the 3 people downstairs heard that she was not going, they ignored her. Only Xianghua was holding the card and wondering if the 20 or so people were still alive. He was a little hesitant, but he also knew that Fengjie didn't say anything. He couldn't cause trouble for her. After all, even nascent soul cultivators didn't come out after going in, let alone her. Fengjie was cultivating in his room, while Xianghua and Du Fan waited downstairs. Bai Xiao said that he was going out to buy something, but he didn't come back until evening. The two of them felt that something was wrong. One of them stayed and the other went out to look for him, but they couldn't find him. Finally, they knocked on Fengjie's door. Fengjie, who opened the door, still looked a little sleepy. She looked at the two people in front of the door with a dignified expression and couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. What's wrong? Chapter 803. Disappeared? What do you mean? Her eyes darkened and her voice turned cold. In the afternoon he said that he was going out to buy some things and would be back soon. Who knew that he would be gone until now? I went out to look for him but couldn't find him. I asked around but there was no news. Du Fan frowned and said, I even went to the city gates to ask around. However, the guards at the gates said that there were too many people going in and out so they couldn't remember. Fengjie walked out and went downstairs. When he arrived outside the inn, he looked at the sky and his eyes moved slightly. Young master, do you think that the people from the 100 Years Mountain captured him? Xianghua asked. She looked at him and asked, besides this, could it be anyone else? They had only been here for a few days and had not made any enemies. Moreover, the person they captured was Xiaobai. Besides the people from the 100 Years Mountain, who else could it be? It seems that they were worried that I wouldn't go, so they captured Xiaobai. What's their purpose in forcing me to go? That day she and Xiaobai had entered the array and the black-robed man had asked them to leave. But today she didn't go and they came looking for her? It's getting dark. Mistress, should we go? Du Fan asked as his gaze fell on her. Go? How can we not go? Since they've captured someone to force me to go, if I don't go, would they let it go? Her voice was cold as she said. She then said to the two of them, the two of you can stay here. Mistress, I'll go with you, Du Fan said. I'll go too. Xianghua also opened his mouth and looked at her. There's no reason for us to stay here if young master goes. Moreover, I also want to see if they're dead or alive. Seeing this, she glanced at the two of them and said, then let's go. With that said, she brought the two of them to the 100 Years Mountain. When they arrived at the 100 Years Mountain, the sky had already turned completely dark. When they were about to ascend the mountain, Du Fan lit a fire to illuminate the path. The air was still filled with a gloomy aura. Occasionally, a chilly wind would blow, causing people to involuntarily shiver. Fengjie, who was walking in front, had a normal expression. It was just ghost. It wasn't like she hadn't encountered them before. It was just that this place gave her a strange and dangerous feeling. She didn't want to set foot in here. Unexpectedly, she didn't want to come, but the people here wanted her to come. Since that was the case, she wanted to see what kind of ghost place it was. Without a voice drifted through the night, accompanied by a gust of chilly wind. It sounded like a ghost's howl, echoing faintly in the ears of the three. Before the voice had finished, the surrounding trees and bushes rustled, as if someone was walking, but they couldn't see the figure. Some footsteps that didn't belong to them sounded behind the three of them. They were messy but clear. Xianghua, who had walked to the back of the group, glared. He pulled out his sword and swept it behind him. Following the attack of the sword chi, there seemed to be a panicked voice. With a whoosh, the sword chi cut through the night sky. The footsteps behind them disappeared once again as if they had never appeared. However, after the footsteps disappeared, a strange laughter faintly sounded in the air. That laughter came closer and closer until it seemed to stop right beside them. Chapter 804. Do you know the way? It's okay, I know the way. I'll lead the way. The faint words were accompanied by a chilling aura. However, as soon as she finished speaking, she let out a shrill scream. That shrill scream almost instantly cut through the night and broke the gloomy atmosphere inside. In an instant, the sound of a bird flapping its wings and flying rang out in the night. Du Fan and Xianghua's bodies were tense. It could be said that the two of them had been in a state of high tension ever since they stepped into this place. Especially when they saw the strange and shocking white-colored ghost that had suddenly appeared before Fengjie. They were terrified to the point their hearts jerked. They were just about to shout loudly when they saw Fengjie flip her palm, and then a clump of flames caught the ghost off guard and incinerated it into nothingness. Seeing this scene, the moment they relaxed, they were even more shocked because they noticed that there was no aura of spiritual power surging from her body. However, at that moment, a cluster of flames surged from her hand and burned the ghost at a speed that was too fast for them to cover their ears. The ghost didn't even have time to escape. They thought that women would always be afraid of ghosts, and this kind of fear came from the bone marrow and was almost instinctive. But they never expected that she would be extremely calm as she looked at the ghost, and with a wave of her hand she annihilated the ghost. "If I want to come in, do I need you to lead the way?" Fengjiu coldly snorted. She raised her hand, extinguished the flames and continued walking forward. The two people behind her didn't dare to stay and quickly followed behind her. At this moment, Du Fan realized that his master's cultivation in arrays was above his. He had to look left and right carefully, but she walked casually. However, every point she stepped on was the eye of the array. The array that was originally changing only changed in the first part of the path, but it was almost like a straight road in the back. It was as if she had destroyed a ghost with a wave of her hand. On the way down, other than the strange noises that came from the night, there were no more ghosts around them. Even the footsteps that they had heard before did not appear again. When they walked out of the maze formation and arrived inside, they still saw a dense fog spreading out in the darkness. However, within this fog, there were faint green ghostly flames leaping about. They didn't know if it was an illusion, but Xiang Hua and Du Fan saw that in the night, whether it was in the air, on the ground, on the trees, or in the bushes, there were faintly discernible ghosts. There were so many of them that they sucked in a breath of cold air. Fengjiu, who was in front, indifferently glanced around and saw all the ghosts. The chaotic and faint cries echoed in the air and drifted with the night wind. At this moment, the fog in front of them seemed to be pushed aside by someone. It automatically moved to the sides, revealing a winding path. A black-cloaked person appeared on the path. He raised his head slightly and looked at Fengjiu. "Please come in." That person turned slightly and gestured for them to enter. Fengjiu didn't look carefully that day. Now that he looked again, he realized that this black-cloaked person was actually a ghost cultivator. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.